Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, so today I'll be talking to you guys about XVMS, what it entails, and a whole lot more as well. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started with this. Uh, so the first question that we'll need to ask is, what is XVMS? Well, as it was referred to earlier, it was called the X- Video Management Software or System. It is a piece of software meant to allow us to manage the equipment, all of our equipment, so security cameras, access control, and intercom, all in one centralized location. You may note that we do have a different piece of software, the NVMS, which seems to be doing the same thing. I'll be explaining the differences very soon. But the importance of this is that it is a centralized management system, and it's not just for, or it's not just to refer to it as video management, okay? So just to give you a difference between NVMS and XVMS, I've made this handy little diagram here. On the left, there's NVMS. You may have used this software many times before, or you've had customers who've used this software on their computers. And you will note that there are two parts, or maybe you wouldn't have noticed, but there are in fact actually two parts to the NVMS v3. There is a service, and then there is a client. The service is what does all the background stuff. This is what accesses all of our equipments. So recorders, cameras, controllers, door stations, and indoor stations. And the client is what presents that information to the people who are trying to access it. In the case of NVMS v3, the service and the client are all packaged together into a single piece of software. The XVMS, however, is differentiated because the service and the client are actually separated into two different pieces of software. They're still going to be roughly referred to the same way. There's the XVMS service, and that's the software that actually is hosted on a server of some sort. And then there is an XVMS client. So both of them are still going to be called XVMS, but these are actually two separate things. The XVMS client will be meant to interface with the service or access the service and present you what you want to see. Generally speaking, these are going to be something like camera views, or it could be playback or the likes as well. Now, why do we care a lot about this kind of separation between the service and the client? Well, having the service and the client be separate allows us to have significant control over the people who are going to access our equipment, right? So here I have a diagram, and just for example, on the left, I have some roles set up for logistics, management, sales, and I have three people set into them: Jeff, Tom, and myself, Perry. Though here I am a sales when I'm not really a sales, actually. And over on the right, in this case, I'm using cameras, but we could do the same thing with access control and intercoms as well. I have listed out 4 different categories for cameras to be put in: loading docks, external cameras, and internal cameras, and cash registers. And in this case, the management, Tom, in general, will probably be accessing or be capable of accessing all the cameras. That's why he has the ability to access all of them, as you can see with the green box. Whereas logistics, Jeff is only going to have access to cameras for the loading docks, and myself as sales, I'm going to have access to, cash registers or something along those lines. And those abilities to access and see those specific cameras are going to carry onto that specific person. And you're going to see why that becomes important not too long from now. But before we get into that, I want to interest you into why you should use XVMS over NVMS v3. If that centralized management portion that I showed earlier is not already good enough for you to see why you should use it, well, since we are separating off the service and the client in XVMS is extremely simplified and very, very streamlined. Over there on the right, what users are going to see, and in this case, when I'm referring to users, I'm going to be talking, generally speaking, about end users. These are going to be people who are probably not very tech savvy. They're going to want software that is very simple to use. They just want to do a small number of steps to accomplish the things that they want to do. So in this case on the right, you can see that Jeff is logging in. He has two options to either go to monitoring or alarm center. And if he goes into monitoring, immediately he can see his cameras. There are not a lot of choices there for him. He's not going to get bogged down in hundreds of different configuration options that you are going to see like in NVMS v3. Now, over on the left, what the techs are going to see is going to be seeing the service side of it. They're not really going to be looking at the monitoring side or the client side, and they'll be doing things like setting up roles, setting up accounts, setting up permissions for people, so that the people that are actually going to be monitoring are going to have a more streamlined and easier time setting up the software. I don't have here a image of NVMS v3, but hopefully many of you in attendance here have actually used NVMS v3. And on your first installation and access, you'll probably notice that immediately getting into the client and into the control panel, there's probably something like 40 buttons that you can pick from. For a standard end user, someone who's not really too savvy, just seeing the number of options is extremely intimidating. And a lot of times they're going to be kind of repulsed by it. They're going to say, like, this is too complicated for me, right? And then you have to go through and walk them through everything in order for them to kind of get calmed down and trust that they're going to be able to operate the software. If there's not that many options, they're not going to be as intimidated. And so the presentation to the clients or the end users is going to look and feel a lot better than it is for NVMS v3. The next is that, like we were talking about earlier, for permission management, I can control who gets to see what, and I can control what they can actually do. So in the case of Tom here, who was management, if anyone remembers from the previous slides, he probably should be able to access most, if not all, of the functions. And over on the left side for Tom, you can see that he does, in fact, have all the options to do all the things. He can do monitoring and alarm center, which should be fairly standard things. He can look at alarms and events, search for video. You can even see the health of all of his cameras, search for evidence and whatnot. Whereas Jeff, who really is just working in logistics, I wouldn't expect that Jeff should need to do any of that kind of stuff other than looking at the cameras. And so I only provide him the ability to do monitoring. And over on the right side of that right image, you can see that he has access to fewer cameras than Tom does, because he does not need to see all the cameras, okay? So just to reiterate, the ability to create individual users that have access and be able to finely tune the permissions that each user has is one of the main points for centralized management software such as X-VMS. And next, now I'm going to go into how this is going to feel for the user of the software, is that every single individual person can customize their own views for themselves. And just to explain, this is going to be something that is carried with their account. Okay, so anytime Jeff uses Jeff's account, he will see the same cameras and it will be in the same view that he is always used to. You may note that a lot of times when you install NVMS v3, the cameras just load up in whatever the order the cameras are in, which is kind of what it's supposed to expect. And if you are trying to create a custom view, every single time you install NVMS v3, you must create a custom view, regardless of whether or not you've had a custom view already made before. And this is not going to be an issue with X-VMS, since the X-VMS is going to have a service side, which is going to host all that information. And regardless of where the end user goes to set up or what computer they're going to access, as long as it has the control client, they are going to be able to use it exactly the same way that they always use it. And here I have a a slide with a few transitions just to really pound in that point. So I have Jeff here. He's in Los Angeles, and he sees this specific view, which is the same view from the previous slide. Well, what if Jeff is a person that has to regularly move around for his job, right? He needs to go to multiple different locations to do, different things for whatever reason. Well, if he goes to a different location and he uses XVMS client and he accesses the XVMS server with his Jeff account, he still sees everything exactly the same. He does not need to do any kind of configuration in order to be able to operate as if he were in LA. And this is going to stay true regardless of where he goes and regardless of what computer he uses. You might be thinking, well, true, Jeff could just have a laptop and go to New York and then go to Texas and then go to Florida. Well, that doesn't have to be the case. What if he doesn't bring a laptop? That's no problem. If his company has a computer at that location and it has XVMS installed on it, he just has to log in as Jeff and he gets to use it exactly the same as if he were on his computer at any other location. Okay, so the ability to move computers and transition, it's going to be effectively seamless. There's not going to be any noticeable change when you're using the software between different people, or sorry, not different people, different computers or different endpoints. And next to go on with the seamless transition is also that if they're using the app, and most likely they probably will want to use the app, is that the app functions pretty much like the computer client. You're still going to log in with the exact same username and password. This is going to be a departure from where LTS Connect works. So hopefully many of you have used LTS Connect and understand how it works. But anyone who's using LTS Connect, each individual person always has to have it set up their specific way on their specific phone, okay? And there isn't really an easy way to transition between multiple phones if they want to maintain the same user experience. They have to continuously reconfigure to get it exactly the way they want. However, with XVMS, since everything is still accessing the XVMS server, the client, or sorry, not the client, the app is going to act like the client. You still log in using the same username, using the same password as you would do on your phone, or sorry, not your phone, your computer. So swapping between the computer and the phone is going to be, again, pretty much seamless. And all the cameras that you're going to be able to view are going to be available right there, just as if you were using the client, so that people don't have to think about, well, LTS Connect acts somewhat differently from NVMS v3, so I have to use it slightly differently than I would use NVMS v3. Having to have end users understand and know that there's two different ways to operate what they might believe is the exact same thing. Sometimes they don't exactly like that. And so having a relatively seamless transition makes it feel better for the end user. And lastly, now these are, or not lastly, and next, these are more for you to add value onto the system. Some of these things are available in NVMS v3, but they are not nearly as powerful as in XVMS. So we can create alerts, and in these cases, XVMS is something that is explicitly done. So if you don't tell the software to do anything, like send alerts or anything like that, then it won't actually do anything. You must tell the software to do something in order for the software to actually do anything. And you might be thinking, well, that sounds kind of obvious, but that's not actually the case. If you've used NVMS v3, you may have noted that when you install or add in cameras, that immediately your alarms are kind of flooded with motion detection alerts, which is pretty normal. Motion detection is enabled by default on all of our systems, along with motion recording. So you would think, well, it should be there. But a lot of times motion detection, and we've spoken about this in previous webinars, motion detection is not exactly the most useful event ever, right? There are a lot of motion detection that would be considered false positives, and they're not really worthwhile to even be alerted about. And so out of the box, NVMS v3 is flooding you with tons of information that may not be useful. Whereas XVMS is the opposite. Out of the box, it gives you nothing. You are expected to tell it to do something. And so you can finely tune XVMS to operate in a way that benefits your customer. So your customer has set up certain perimeter detections, and you can make it so that certain perimeter detections have certain priorities. As you can see here on the left, and when I'm outside, I have crossed over a specific line crossing that I've set up. I'm not inside the building. I consider that to be low priority. Whereas on the right, I've set an intrusion detection on my chair because it's my chair, of course. And so anyone who sits in there, I consider it to be a high priority to be alerted for. And though I haven't shown it here, each of these alerts can be associated to specific accounts. So that one alert on the right, that's high priority, maybe I only want Perry to see those alerts, and Jeff and Tom don't see those alerts. And I can do that. That is perfectly allowed in the software. Not only that, I can also set it on schedule. So if I want it to notify me if someone's sitting in the chair anywhere between the hours of 9 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock in the evening, I can do so and then not receive any alerts outside of those times. And again, those, oh, I'm sorry about that. I just burped. Those specific schedules are also, again, set to each person. So each person gets their own specific template for their alerts. You can very quickly, or not very quickly, I apologize. You can very easily fine tune the experience that your customer gets. And having these very customized experiences makes the customer probably feel like they're being more taken care of. And then I've added this in. This is EMAP. I have been asked many times about EMAP, and it is something that is available in NVMS v3. However, NVMS v3 is meant for only really single site installations. If you use NVMS v3, you are limited to a single map. If anyone has ever actually used NVMS v3, you may have noticed that effectively there is only one map that you can use. Whereas XVMS, which is more meant to be for large scale or distributed installations, you can set up many, many different maps for many different areas, and you can install the cameras into the map as you so choose, and you are able to also receive alerts and have it link onto the map. This is useful because say you are in a situation where you have a customer and you've installed 500 cameras over all of their locations. It is not exactly the simplest thing to load up 500 cameras onto many monitors and actually get useful information out of it. It looks cool and all, right? Everyone likes the idea of looking at a wall full of cameras and you see 500 cameras, like, wow, that's so cool. But if we're honest with ourselves, we'll see that having 500 cameras over 10 TVs or 10 monitors of some sort, even if it's, they're huge, those aren't very useful. How many people can actually watch 500 different cameras at one time and be able to accurately ascertain, the kind of events that are going on over all of those cameras? Not many, I'm going to say, not many. Now, the vast majority of the time, you want the software to be able to filter out the events and give you just the events that you want, distill it down just to the stuff that you want, which goes hand in hand with the previous slide where I was talking about those alerts. If you tell it to only alert you in specific situations, such as 9 to 5, someone triggers a specific line crossing, you can have it pop up on the map, at which point then you can load up the live view on the map and actually see what is occurring. Or you can look at the playback, of course, of what is occurring. Because when you have so many cameras, someone could be doing something on one camera and you would be looking at another camera from 5 screens away. And you wouldn't be able to know whether or not it's actually happening or if it's meaningful. So being able to specify the events and link them in a useful way will provide a more effective monitoring solution than just watching your cameras. And to go along with the idea of effective management or monitoring of your system, if you have a lot of cameras, again, it's not really easy to have all those cameras loaded up, nor is it really meaningful to have all those cameras loaded up. In those cases, you want to have some way to monitor the health of your system. You want to be able to easily and quickly identify if there are issues with any equipment that is, installed and set up on X-VMS. And in the case of X-VMS, we do have health monitoring that's available as a permission for all users, though, again, chances are in this situation, it would just be Tom, since both Perry and Jeff are not management, and they probably aren't expected to worry about the health of their monitoring systems. In this case, we can see whether or not cameras have been offline. In this case, you can see that 6 cameras did go offline at some point in time. And if I were actually to click on that 6 icon, I would move down to this lower section where it would actually tell me which cameras went offline. It would tell me when they last went offline, and it would tell me how long they were offline. These are all pieces of information that need to be quickly provided to the people who are monitoring the systems. If you have a camera down and you are using cameras to protect important things, you want to be able to quickly identify whether or not that's something naturally caused or unnaturally caused, first of all, if someone's, deliberately messing with the equipment, or if it's just a camera has been installed for 19 years and is finally giving up the ghost. You want to be able to know those pieces of information and quickly and accurately identify it. If you'd had, again, in that situation, like I said earlier, 10 screens and you had 500 cameras loaded into those 10 screens, and you saw one of the small screens go video loss, there's not really an easy way for you to know which one's which. A lot of times when you have 10 screens, you probably don't have any way to actively monitor or interface with that specific screen. But over here with health monitoring, we can quickly identify which camera it is. In my case, the names aren't exactly the most descriptive, but in theory, you would have cameras that have more descriptive names, or even better, if you have the EMAP set up, you can actually click on the camera and you can find out where it is on your EMAP, so you know which location it is. And on that location, you would know where on the building your camera is actually down. This also goes with the NVRs and DVRs as well. You can see that in the lower section of the top picture, the device online rate. That is actually referring to the recorders in this case. So my recorder also did go offline for about 7.5 minutes. So it's not just referring to the cameras. You can also see if it's the recorder, and you may be able to interpret whether or not that was an issue with an internet connection problem, or if it was just the recorder going down and not the cameras going down. You have a lot of information in your hands to be able to identify whether or not an issue is actually going to be really important. Also, the health monitoring, as you can see over on the right, that is also available on the phone app as well. And lastly, I wanted to add these 2 parts because a lot of times, actually, people are getting X-VMS because of the access control capabilities on the phone app. Okay, so a big thing with access control, which is actually not shown on this first picture here, is that you can control it from the phone. And also you can control it from the control client. If you've used NVMS v3, you may have noted that the section where you are unlocking and locking doors or setting it to remain locked or remain unlocked, that is separate from your ability to monitor the cameras. And in X-VMS's cases, you can actually link the doors or the access points to specific cameras if those cameras are looking at the doors. And you can see here in this case, even though there's not attached to a door, this camera has been linked to a specific door. And I'm able to unlock and lock my doors from the view of the camera itself. I don't need to waste space on my screen to put in the door separately from it. And the most important part, which I was actually talking about, is actually the phone app access. This is something that is often asked for. Sadly, it is not available for LTS Connect, but it is available for X-VMS. And you do have the ability to do things such as unlocking, locking, or setting unlocked of your doors. And also you can receive event information about people who are actually accessing those doors while you are actually monitoring your system. Okay, and so that brings to an end what I was going to talk about for the XVMS system. I'm fairly sure there were quite a few questions because I saw some hands go up quite a few times while I was presenting. So I'll be going over that. But before I do that, if you have any questions about XVMS, most notably the sales of of the XVMS system, you can refer yourself to a sales rep. If you do not already have a sales rep, I will be keeping this page opened up so that you can locate the nearest office to you and maybe get access to a sales rep to inquire about LTS X-VMS. Now I'm going to look at the questions that have been asked. It looks like some people actually wrote in the chat too. I apologize. Give me 1 second. Apologize. Okay, so it looks like some people have been asking questions in the chat. I think maybe I'll go over the chat first. If you've already asked a question in the chat, don't re-ask it in the Q&A section. I'll slowly go through it. But if you have not asked a question yet, try to go and do it in the Q&A section, not in the webinar, not in the chat. Okay. Let's see. So it looks like a lot of people with greetings. Greetings, everyone. So it looks like our first question. This is cloud-based or VPN/SD-WAN required. This is not cloud-based software, though it is just software itself. If you choose to host this on some cloud service, so AWS, Azure, or anything like that, you may choose to do so. NDAA compliant. It is actually not hardware itself. So if I remember correctly, NDAA is referring to hardware-specific things. So this is just software. So you can install it on NDAA compliant hardware. We are merely providing the software. That was from Rawl. Let's see. There's another question. In past, searching for specific events was very time consuming. Since the server is separated from the client, is the searching for events faster? The searching for events, from what I've noticed, is definitely faster. There are more things that you do have to specify for it. With XVMS, you are expected to do a little more initial legwork. And so for the events search, you will have to provide quite a bit of information, though some parts of it are in fact actually streamlined. A lot of people are searching for events that are very, very near to the time or to current time. So by default, it actually just searches for current date rather than asking you to specify a specific time span. But you will have to also choose the kind of events that you're going to choose, that you're going to actually look for. Is XVMS meant to be an RMR generator for your dealers? I'm not entirely certain whether or not it could be. It depends on whether or not you are going to be providing the service for them or not. XVMS is merely just the software, just to give you, just to reiterate, XVMS itself is just the software. It does need to be hosted on a server of some sort, though when I say server, really it just needs to be a computer that needs to be online, okay? If you are hosting these servers for your customers, so you as the dealer are hosting a server and then hosting XVMS for your customer, then this could in fact be used as an RMR generator. Though if your customer is large enough and wants to do everything in-house, then they will, provide the server themselves, at which point most likely you are going to be providing some type of training for them at which afterwards they will be using X-VMS on their own. Next question, how will X-VMS license base on site, customer, or number of cameras? Oh, I apologize. This is actually something that I did not cover over. So let me just talk about that right now. So X-VMS, the licenses for X-VMS are per channel, okay, are per channel. So you can purchase any number of channels at any point, and you can expand that number. And these are not directly linked to the cameras that you are going to use. If you buy 100 channels for your license and you have 100 cameras, you can add all of them in. If something random happens, a fire at a location happens, and 20 cameras go out of commission, you are not out 20 licenses. You still have 100 licenses. You only have 80 cameras. So you can replace those 20 cameras that were destroyed and then re-add them back onto your license. They are, specific device agnostic. They are just there as a capability of the software. Hopefully that answered your question. I can't see all the comments, so I don't exactly know if those answered your questions or not. Next. If we have clients with multiple types of NVRs cameras and even some with LTS, NVR, and other brands like Honeywell, et cetera, does X-VMS have the ability to unify these into one console, or does the client have to replace the NVRs that are not supported? Can X-VMS output a layout of specific camera views to RTSP stream? Okay, so that's a pretty big question. It looks like it's probably built into at least 2 parts or maybe even 3 parts. Apologies. So first part is, does X-VMS have the ability to unify these into one console, or does the client have to replace the NVRs that are not supported? Sadly, X-VMS is running on our protocol, so you will have to be using our recorders. You could have third-party cameras on our recorders, and then our recorders are added into X-VMS, and that is possible. But adding in third-party recorders into X-VMS, not exactly going to work out. The second part of your question, can X-VMS output a layout of specific camera views to RTSP stream? No, sadly, it cannot do that. Let's see. There's a question about how, so there's a question about getting a recording of this webinar. If you are an attendee to this webinar afterwards, as everyone probably noticed when they came in, or maybe partway through, it did say that this webinar is being recorded. The link to the webinar will be provided afterwards at some point in time. That's not myself who's doing it, so I don't exactly know when, but very likely it'll be soon. I believe it's going to be a YouTube link that all of you are going to be provided for it. There's a question here that is from Collins, where it says, please, can we talk on mile site cameras too? I'm not entirely certain what that question specifically means. So if you need to clarify, you can open up another question, or maybe you'll put in some comments later. Let's see. There's a question about, please say a few words on two-way audio. I'm not sure what you mean about that. Two-way audio is going to be available in the client the same way NVMS V3 can access two-way audio. There's no difference in anything like that. Another question, is the software capable of storing backup data off the location? Yes, you can have it set up to, record to an IP SAN or equivalent. What are the effective management of the camera and quality standard, and what's the possibility of linking to map and location? What's the assurance for tracking device or app combined with quality videos or picture? That is, I apologize, Michael, but that is a little confusingly worded. If you want to reword your question and ask that again, I'll try to look and see if you've re-asked it. If not, and you think that maybe this is a complicated enough question, it would be best for you to forward a more detailed question over to your sales rep, and most likely they'll forward it to me, and then I'll be able to provide you with a more detailed answer. There's a question where it says, is the intelligence from the camera itself and or XVMS? XVMS is merely interfacing and managing or aggregating all the equipment together. It does not actually provide intelligence separate from it. Like intelligence onto the video stream is what I mean in that case. Obviously, there are other intelligent things that it does, such as the ability to set up alerts on schedule, alerts to specific roles or specific users, those kinds of things. There's a question on what is the up-to-date specs on a PC to be used. I do have a document for that. I'll be probably asking our marketing department how we can provide that for you. If, however, they aren't able to just straight up email it, I have provided those documents on the spec requirements to all the salespeople. So if you have a sales rep, or if you don't currently have a sales rep, you can look at the contacts page to find a sales rep, and they'll be able to provide it for you as well. Can you mix Platinum and ProVS cameras in the software and VRs as well? I know that you are, when I answered the question, this was after you asked, but I'll just go back and say it again. You can have ProVS cameras if they are on Platinum and VRs, but not ProVS and VRs. How to upgrade XVMS to a new version without the very complicated way it has been done in the past. So the complicated method, if you are referring to, I think you might be referring to when we made the jump from 1.6 to the current version of 2.2. That is because it was a major version difference. If you're going through minor version differences, so 2.2 to 2.3 when it releases, for example, then there's not really going to be an extremely complicated upgrade path for it. Is there an additional cost for XVMS? Yes, it is license-based, so you do have to purchase for the licenses. You can download XVMS and use it as like a demo for testing purposes on our website, on our downloads page. However, if you need to expand the capabilities of XVMS, you will have to purchase licenses for it. Are you going into access control more, or was that it? I just wanted to talk a little bit about access control. I didn't want to go into the depths with access control. Access control is a extremely large portion of things. If you've used NVMS v3 to set up access control, XVMS setup is almost exactly the same. There isn't really too much different between them in terms of configuration of access control. You're going to be adding people, you're going to be creating permissions, you're going to be creating schedules, and then you're going to be combining those three together in order to give access to people. It's just going to be found on XVMS rather than NVMS. Next question, if using XVMS hosted on my server, do I even need VMS server any longer? If you're referring to NVMS, then you do not need NVMS if you are now using XVMS. Let's see. How much is the, if you're looking for pricing, you will have to speak to your sales rep. They'll be able to provide you pricing information. Let's see, next question. How to upgrade. The current upgrade methodology, it's not found within the software itself. You will have to end the service, download the new version of the software. So if you're using, say, 2.0 or something like that, 2.1, and 2.2 is released on our website, you would download the new installer from our website, and you would run it when XVMS is not running on that computer. It'll ask you to essentially write over the installation, kind of, and it's actually just a straight upgrade, and you would do it pretty much like that. So yes, if you have ProVS NVRs, they will not be integratable with XVMS. You will have to use Platinum NVRs. If you have ProVS IP cameras and they are added onto Platinum NVRs, you can add those Platinum NVRs onto X-VMS and be able to see the ProVS IP cameras. And finally, I have reached the end of the chat. I'm doing fine, thank you. I finally reached the end of the chat, so now apologize. I'll now go into the Q&A section and answer the Q&A questions. Do we have to create a user or can we read from LDAP? There is an ability for the X-VMS to interface with Active Directory. I personally have not played with that functionality. I don't have a server to set up Active Directory on, but yes, there is functionality to pull and be able to use the Active Directory accounts to log in and also be set up. Though you can choose to do either. So you can do the creation of users manually, or you can get it from your Active Directory. Does the client have playback feature? Yes, it does. It is found in the monitoring section of the client. Anything you can do in NVMS, you're going to be able to do in X-VMS, and that includes playback as well. Is it free app? X-VMS itself is, the licenses are not free, but the app, like the phone app, is free. Hopefully that answers your question. Next question. Can Jeff be assigned to monitor different locations in different cities on his same screen? Yes, that is possible. I just need to make sure that Jeff's role, the logistics role, has the appropriate permissions to monitor the other locations and the cameras at those locations as well. There's a question about the cloud base, but I believe I covered that already. Yeah, this is the same person too. Next question, you have to download the app to whatever computer you're using. So the X-VMS service needs to be installed on the server or whatever computer is going to be running 24/7. Anyone else who is accessing it doesn't download the service. They merely download the control client, which is a much lighter, thinner client than NVMS is. It runs significantly faster, and it is a bit more streamlined. And that is what people who are going to be monitoring will be downloading on their computers instead. NDA compliant, already answered the question. Oh, sorry. Yeah, let me actually set these to finished. I apologize. Let me do this real quick. I believe I've done these. Yeah. Okay, next question. How does the client software connect to server, port forwarding, or cloud relay? There is no cloud access for this server, so you're either going to do port forwarding or you're going to do some site-to-site VPN or the equivalent for access into X-VMS. Is there any planned single sign-on functionality? That I'm not entirely certain about. I can ask that for you, and then I can give you a follow-up on the answer on whether or not that's going to be provided. But currently, I apologize, but I do not have an answer for that. Next question, when will X-VMS app be available? It is currently available. X-VMS, I have it on my phone at the very least, so I know that at least on Android, it is available. Let me actually just check the Play Store just to make sure. Yeah, I see it on the Play Store, so it should be available. Can I receive a copy of this presentation? Yeah, yes, you will be receiving. Yeah, so the PowerPoint I will also be providing, so they'll also be sending that out as well as a recording. Will X-VMS require LTS cameras? It will require Platinum NVRs and DVRs, and most likely going to be Platinum IP cameras as well. Though if you're using third-party IP cameras on our Platinum recorders, that is also available. And again, with the MileSite cameras, I'm not entirely certain what you mean by that. So if you could clarify what you mean by that. Questions about the recording already did. Does the client app have access control as well? Yes, the client app does have access control. I believe I showed that near the end, where you are able to unlock and lock doors and also do it from the phone app at the same time. For pricing, you will have to speak to a sales rep. I'm really a tech person, so that isn't really something that I would be given. Yes, fisheye does count as a single license, unless you're breaking it up into multiple cameras. That's where it starts to get confusing. So if you have cameras that have multiple channels in them, so take, for example, fisheye, you can choose to either do a single channel or you can do multiple channels. If you use it as single channel, it takes up one XVMS channel. If you use it in multi-channel mode, it uses multiple XVMS channels. This also is true for things like the thermal camera and the multi-lens camera, the 7553. Computer recommendations, again, that will be provided later. Questions about access cameras, as long as they are ONVIF compliant and you add them onto our recorders, our platinum recorders, then yes, they will be compatible. Will health monitoring show HDTVI cameras that are offline, or does it only work with IP? It will also work with HDTVI because you'll have, it'll show as a separate alert, or sorry, a separate event, because if you look at the logs for HDTVI, they show as signal loss. They don't refer to them as disconnected or offline. Have you had any customers who use S2 Linnell systems migrate to XVMS? I do apologize, but I don't know if we have had any customers who have used S2 and migrated to XVMS, though I can actually see if I can dig up that information for you. There's some other ones as well. Let's see. Yeah, Dwayne, I do apologize. This webinar is meant for kind of like an introduction into XVMS. If you have some questions about specific functionalities that need to be done, your best bet would be to send the rep those exact questions and then have them forward it over to me or my department, the business development department, and then I'll be able to provide them or provide you with a more hopefully satisfying answer. Let's see, do you offer technical support? You can onboard to your team. We do provide technical support on XVMS. If it is something that is extremely complicated for setup, most likely it's going to be myself who is going to be assisting, but basic technical support can be provided by our technical support team. Can devices be adopted using QR code? Sorry, using a QR code at the customer site? No, sadly, these are not going to be going through cloud in any way. For the questions on the computer specs, I'm just going to be setting those as answered because you will be provided for it, that information after this webinar, okay? Let's see. Can a backup of NVMS v3 be used to transfer device information to XVMS? Sadly, that is not something that can be done. NVMS v3 configurations are not capable of being imported in onto X-VMS. Oh, here's actually a pretty good question. Is there a trial period or temporary access key to or temporary access key to test drive the system? Can you buy just the server software? Well, first of all, it is just software. So if you're buying anything, you are actually just buying the licenses for the software. You can request for a demo license, or you can just download the software and use it, but there's a very limited number of channels that are available with just the downloaded version, which is essentially kind of like a demo. But if you want to trial something that's a little bigger, you can send a request to your sales rep for, say, like 60 cameras, and I want a demo license for 60 cameras, and you'll be provided a license that will be active for 90 days. for you to essentially test out and use. Is X-VMS license-based? Yes, they are license-based. You'll have to speak to your sales rep in order to get more information about that kind of information. Windows only, yes, another important question. X-VMS is available to Windows only, no Unix, Linux, or Mac support. Can end users use the X-VMS mobile app for their own access? This question, I'm assuming you mean that they just want to use the app and then access their own equipment. No, the app accesses an X-VMS server. It doesn't access directly into Platinum equipment. So if they don't have a server to log into, they cannot just use the mobile app. Are the licenses one-time purchase? Yes, they are one-time purchase. So you purchase once and you get that specific number of channels that you've purchased, though you can't expand. So if you buy 60 now, and then 5 months down the line, you're all like, well, this customer needs more. You don't have to buy a whole new license that is more, you just add on. So if they already have 60 and they need another 60, you just go to your sales rep again and ask for another 60 licenses, and you add it on to your old license, and you'll get a total of 120. And it looks like the same question from Michael. Yeah, hopefully you can email me a more detailed question about this. I apologize, it is a little confusing to me. I'm not sure I understand exactly what you're asking here, but hopefully you can email me more descriptive question, and I can provide you with a satisfactory answer. Is a single door access lock considered a channel for subscription purposes? If it is Platinum equipment, then yes, it would still count as one channel, and you would need a single license, a single channel license, at least. Can we get a ballpark on licensing cost? I don't even know a ballpark on licensing costs. You'll have to speak to your sales rep. Are licenses lifetime with updates, or licenses are yearly/monthly? Currently, from what I know, licenses are available for the lifetime of the major version. So all of version 2, if you purchase a license, it will be available for version 2. That does not mean that after there's a new major version, however long in the future that's going to be, that your licenses immediately become inactive. You can continue using version 2 for as long as you want. System requirements will be provided later. If you can record directly to network storage, is an LTS and VR required? Technically not. Obviously, you'll have to consider your situations, whether or not it's going to be more beneficial to constantly be streaming information across a large distributed network. Like if you have a location that has, say, 58 megapixel cameras, that's not really unreasonable or unheard of. 58 megapixel cameras, you're going to be looking at probably consuming something around the order of at least 200 megabytes per second, or sorry, not megabytes, megabits per second. I apologize. 200 megabits per second upload. That's going to be constant too. And do remember that if X-VMS is actually off-site from that location, and there is any kind of network drop-off, you lose all your recording since you're recording to X-VMS. Okay, so you have to balance your risk versus reward of choosing to not have an on-site recorder. What is the support agreement? Is support provided to client/end user from LTS? We provide support to the installer, so the dealer. In certain situations, like if it is complicated enough, we may sometimes provide some assistance to the end user, but we do not typically provide support directly to the end user. It still will have to be through the dealer. Is it possible to export persons from NVMS v3 to X-VMS? You can export the persons, so the list of people, including their card numbers, and then You will have to modify that Excel, or you'll have to grab the new template from XVMS and then fit the information from NVMS into the new template for XVMS, which is still going to be a lot less work than just manually adding everyone in, but it could be possible. Now, I must reiterate and say that just because you're exporting persons, that's not everything. There are things like permissions, schedules, and templates. Those are not exported from NVMS v3, or well, they can be exported from NVMS v3, but they cannot be imported into XVMS. A very open-ended question here. How can we develop more advanced access control systems? You'll have to be more descriptive about what you mean there. If you have like some very specific kind of business idea or anything like that, that you want to ask questions about, you can direct those questions to me, my email address, or you can direct it to your sales and they can forward it to me. At which point we can go a little more in depth, but this currently is a very open-ended question, so I'm not sure how I would answer it. How can I download the application? If you're talking about XVMS, it's found on our downloads page, www.ltsecurityinc. So that's 1S ltsecurityinc.com/downloads. That's S plural downloads. And you'll find it under the client section. HCP has third-party software integrations. Does XVMS support similar add-ons to HCP the software is derived from? Currently, it does not. What are the ways to get the license and the price? You can get that from your sales rep. And if you don't have a sales rep, again, I have this contact page up on the PowerPoint, which will, hopefully direct you to the closest location, at which point you can get a sales rep and be able to be provided a quote on the licenses. Pro VMS version, I'm assuming you mean Pro VS version. We do have something like that available. That is outside of the current scope of this webinar. It may be possible that at some point in the future, there's going to be another webinar that's going to speak about it. But we do have something. If you have our catalogs, you can see it is in the Pro VS section. It's in the last page, or sorry, not last page. It's in the page after the recorders. It's Pro VS VMS. Can you do fast forward on phone app? I'm assuming you're referring to playback. And yes, you can do fast forward on the phone app. Antonio, sorry that you missed the first few minutes. The recording will be available, so I won't exactly be able to do a summary since it does look like there's still quite a few more questions. I apologize. So you will have to go through the recording instead to see what you missed. Can a fisheye multi-view all record separately? It can. I'm not sure what this specifically has to do with XVMS, and you could get it all to record separately, but there's a lot of depends kind of thing that I need to say because I can't exactly answer it without knowing the specifics that you're asking about. For cost, again, speak to your sales rep. How will footage be secured on site? I'm not entirely certain what you mean by the question. If you're using a recorder, then the footage will be recorded on the recorder. If you are using offsite storage, so XVMS is recording it onto, say, IPSAN or something like that, then the footage will be stored in there instead. But if you want to clarify that question and ask it to me later, hopefully I can get you a better answer as well. But just based on the question as you've written, I'm not entirely certain what you mean. I do apologize. Are licenses sold in quantities of 60 increments, or can you buy one at a time or 10? You can buy whatever quantity you want. If you want to buy just a single license, you can. There are some certain requirements. There's a base license that you need to purchase, and those provide a a certain number of channels. So if you need cameras, you have to buy the base camera license, which gives you 4 channels. If you need access control, you need to buy the base access control license, which has 2 channels. Anything after 4 and 2, you buy them in increments of 1. So you can have anywhere from 4 to 4,000, and it could be any specific number. 3987 cameras. You could do that. Do you have a client that can run on Mac OS? Sadly, it is not provided for Mac. This is a Windows-only software. What's the camera quality? I'm not sure I understand that question and how that relates to X-VMS. If you want to clarify what you mean by this question, maybe I can answer it, but at the moment, I'm not sure what that means. Will there be a required minimum number of licenses? Kind of. I know that you asked this beforehand, but there is a base license that you need to purchase, and that gives you a certain minimum number of channels. 4 for cameras, 2 for access control. Which access control devices are considered platinum and X-VMS compatible? Almost all of our access control equipment is platinum equipment. So yeah. Can we schedule a person's access to this program? Yes, you can actually schedule a person's access to this program. So for example, like when I was talking about Jeff, we can make it so that he can only log in during the work hours. So maybe we don't want him to look at, our logistics or our loading bay cameras outside of work, because maybe he's, thinking about stealing or something like that. So it's like 11 o'clock at night. I can make it so that his ability to log into the system is on schedule as well. Would you advise to drop all NVRs and solely use X-VMS for recording if cameras are on the same premise? Maybe, maybe not. It really depends. There are going to be arguments either way. So again, it's up to you how you want to exactly do that. But either way could work. I apologize that it sounds like a non-answer, but really a lot of these things you're weighing a lot of different factors, and you don't exactly know if one thing's going to be better than the other. When using the app, how secure is the app? Is it possible for someone else to crash the app? Well, the stream itself is encrypted. I guess in theory, it could be possible that someone could specifically inundate the traffic on the specific port that's going outbound. But that would be a very, very, very targeted attack on a person. And it's unlikely that there's any way to kind of protect from it. General protection for these kind of deliberate attacks is to actually just shut off network access on specific ports, at which point, the app would just stop updating. You would no longer be able to utilize it because it's no longer able to communicate over the port. But again, there's only so much that security can be done in one way without really doing everything. Yeah, if you're using it for redundancy, then yes, don't drop the NVR. But I don't know if that was the exact question. It was just whether or not it's okay to just use no NVR in the situation that X-VMS was on the same location. So that is all the questions, it looks like. Let me just make sure that there was no more new questions in chat. Hopefully no one ever asked more questions in chat. But let's see. Looks like maybe only one question. Do you have an idea of upload/download throughput for the server simply connected to NVR to remote site over WAN or VPN, not streaming a camera feed? I haven't looked at the specific numbers, but if you're not feeding any camera information, the amount of data is actually going to be quite low. It's going to be probably on the order of like maybe 50 to 100 kilobits per second. Most of the time, it's just sending kind of like health information over. If it's not camera streams. Okay, if camera streams, then obviously it goes way higher. At a deployment of 100 plus channels, would you advise to run X-VMS independently on a server? I'm not sure what you mean by independently. In theory, it would already be independent, no? Or are you saying like you're going to run X-VMS on like some person's personal computer? And even then, it depends on so many factors. A personal computer could be, could be really good or it could be really bad. So whether or not it needs to be independently run on a server will depend on a host of factors that sadly is not always very clear. I would attempt to always run X-VMS on its own dedicated device. It doesn't need to be server hardware, right? You don't need to go out and purchase an R710, and deck it out with everything and spend like $50,000 or something like that. You don't have to do that. You have to be able to see that there's a small number of cameras, or maybe there's a large number of cameras, and you need to consider whether or not it's going to do that. If a server has other services like SQL web server, would X-VMS require lots of cores? Well, first of all, X-VMS hosts its own web server. So if you already have web server on that server, there's going to be conflicts. So you can't share it with a web server anyways. X-VMS can require a lot of cores and RAM, and it will depend on whether or not streaming is being actively done at that moment. And again, I apologize that these answers are kind of almost non-answers because it's a little difficult when you're working with software which has a variable amount of performance depending on what is actually being requested of it at that moment. Technically, we are past time. I've gone through pretty much all the questions. I know that there are still people who have questions, most likely. Some people are probably shy and don't want to ask questions. That's no problem. If you have any more questions after this, don't hesitate to send your questions out to your sales rep, and they'll be able to forward your questions over to me, at which point, hopefully, I can give you a satisfactory answer. Or if in some situations, again, like I was saying before, they are what you believe to be really complicated and not something that's really suitable to be asked in the webinar, we can go more in depth into a potential solution or maybe an answer to your questions over email instead. Okay, well, have a good day, everyone.